The vote on Bill number 180936 marks a pivotal milestone for Philadelphia's children and families. This legislation has been a marathon and not a sprint. At this moment, 9 out of 10 city council districts have a zip code with 1 out of 10 children poisoned by lead. In 2018, 1 child is diagnosed with significant lead poisoning every single day. It is clear that we as a city can and must do better. Let's do a rewind. Under the leadership of Shelley Yanoff in 2010 and 2011, this council participated in months of negotiation and discussions on how to best protect children in rental properties from the dangers of lead poisoning. That was long before we introduced legislation. Public testimony has revealed quite eloquently why lead poisoning and dealing with it matters. I was blessed to be the mother of a healthy kid. I cannot imagine what it would be like to raise children and grow children who end up with lead poisoning. In 2011, while working to right the ship on this bill, one of the last compromises we secured before the passage of this bill was to limit certification to homes where children ages 6 and under reside. Rue Landau articulated that quite well. I credit my former colleagues, Councilwoman Marian Tasco and Councilwoman Maria Quinones Sanchez, who worked with me closely in helping me to secure the needed votes on that bill. That bill passed 16-1. At that time, we did believe that the legislation, while imperfect, would allow the city to finally get a handle on making rental units safer for children. Now, 8 years later, based on data, we arrived at the clear conclusion that a new, stronger solution was not optional, it's required. There are several challenges with the enforcement of the current law. After 6 years of implementation, the city only received 5,500 certifications of the 22,000 rental properties with children 6 and under. That represents only a 25% compliance rate. The Departments of Health and L&I reported that the bill was designed as practically unenforceable. So it was not an arbitrary decision made by my office. After meeting with those commissioners, we learned from them, and based on data, the bill was practically unenforceable. We discovered that there were other problems with the bill. Through public testimony, we learned that the 2011 bill created an unintended two-tiered housing market, which also has been articulated. The executive director of the Fair Housing Commission eloquently testified that that system led to discriminatory practices, and that is something, of course, we have always tried to avoid. My office has spent over 2 years making sure all sides of this legislative issue have been heard. We participated in the Philadelphia Lead Poisoning Advisory Group convened by Mayor Kinney, along with council members Gim, Bass, Sanchez, and Parker. The advisory group recommended that we extend the bill to all properties. With a consistent open door policy, we met with the administration, landlords, health experts, advocates, and anyone who had anything to say about how we could do better. During the summer of 2018, we met again with the Lead Poisoning Advisory Commission and all of the advocates, PCCY, Community Legal Services, TURN, the Public Interest Law Center, and anyone else who had a bright idea on how we could do better. This is all before the introduction of the bill in October 2018. In October 2018, we introduced that legislation. And again, we met with all stakeholders. My staff and I held formal meetings and conference calls with the Landlord Coalition, who do care about us doing better. We met in 2018, January, February, March, May, June, and again July 24th of 2019. As is our practice, our office leaves no stone unturned when it comes to tackling a complex, layered legislative public health issue. So we talked with those policy professionals in Rochester. We took a trip south to Baltimore, where they have had a universal lead law in place since 1996. We met with those stakeholders to learn how they have been able to successfully implement that law. Then we went to Washington, D.C., fall a year ago, to the National Conference on Lead, where professionals from across the country were convening with a focus on municipalities like Philadelphia still dealing with lead. So the record should reflect we have not been frivolous in our pursuit for a balanced, less onerous solution. But here's the bottom line. Our children continue to be poisoned by lead, even though we have the tools available to create a safer and healthier environment. So let me now share and restate some of the tweaks we've made to the legislation before us. We were asked for clear information on companies within the city who do remediation and certification work. That's now in the bill. We heard concerns that landlords did not have enough time to come into compliance with the law. I get that because we delayed our menu labeling bill for 1.5 years to allow that community to ramp up. So we wrote an extended implementation date into this bill. Landlords asked if we could include provisions in the bill that protect them against tenants who do not provide access to properties. We heard them. We added that provision in the bill. The Lead Coalition was not content with recertification at the time of turnover, which was my preferred remedy, so we removed that from the bill. The wrinkle I referenced in June 2019 was regarding a new development and new information that we as a city were not where we needed to be with regards to technology. We heard apprehensions about the systems of technology that would be ultimately responsible for the implementation and enforcement of the bill. And much to the chagrin of many, and I will even go as far as to say I was bullied, I'm good. In June, I held the bill for 3 months, and I invited and chose to invite all stakeholders back to the table so that they could hear themselves personally from the Health Commissioner and our L&I Commissioner. Commissioner Perry and Commissioner Farley care about getting this right second time around. I also want to thank council members whose offices were able to join us at that July 24th meeting. Last Tuesday, we circulated another set of amendments. Subsequent to that circulation, we were approached again to consider extending the frequency of certification from every 3 years to 5 years. We make no decisions alone. We do the homework. We went back to see what other cities are doing, and I made the decision that we would have it every 4 years based on homework we have from other cities. So compromise has never been an option for us. It's always been a requirement if second time around we want to get this right. My office has worked to the point of exhaustion for compromise for all stakeholders. In August 2019, I had to finally reckon with the reality and quote Councilman Jones, who said, "Common ground might not be possible." I'll accept that. But what we will have is a common understanding that we have to find a pathway to protect our children. So despite what we've heard, keeping our children safe from harmful causes of lead poisoning is not as costly as some has argued. This summer, I had my staff call remediators and others who actually do the work. We had interns on the phone doing our own in-house survey so that we could get a handle ourselves on what it costs to remediate properties. For those properties that do not honor this remediation and seeking to get properties to be lead safe, it's going to be up to $1,500. But if you are a responsible landlord doing the right thing every 4 years, it could be as minimum as $150. The goal of the bill is to address the quality of the housing stock in our city. Landlords raised a very fair criticism. Why should we be responsible for fixing this problem? And I actually support that. You're right. Government has a role in us finding a mutual resolution where everybody has some skin in the game. So my staff and I appeal to the administration to ensure that funds are available for small landlords who will struggle to complete this remediation work. The result? A new small landlord loan program implemented by the planning department will be available for small landlords to make necessary repairs. We also made a budget request to the administration and to President Clark's office for a separate fund dedicated solely to support remediation. Thank you to the Kinney administration for authorizing a $200,000 pilot program that will help small landlords. Contrary to reported opinion that got back to us from Baltimore, and I quote, "We have not given up the store," end quote. In this bill, we have held to the original intent of the bill, and that is universal lead certification for all rental properties. Legitimate concerns have been raised about whether or not there may be unfavorable impact towards the availability of affordable housing. We need to care about that. My limited research tells me, again from Baltimore, and I quote, "Maryland's lead law has not had a negative effect on the availability of affordable rental housing in our city, and that law has been in place since 1996. We champion stricter lead hazard reduction legislation and believe that these standards will enable us to offer healthier housing conditions." So, yes, landlords would bear costs, but you know what? Our children bear the cost as well. Our families bear the cost. Our city bears the cost. Lead poisoning poses costs to all of us. This happens when we see increased costs for special education, medical care, increased involvement with the criminal justice system. We all pay. Here's the good news. Thanks to the leadership of Senator Vincent Hughes and Governor Wolf, the issue of lead is now a priority for the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which has the 6th highest percentage rate for children suffering from lead poisoning. Pennsylvania ranks number 6 when it comes to children suffering from lead poisoning. Just a couple of months ago, Governor Tom Wolf unveiled not one, but 3 initiatives designed to create a lead-free Pennsylvania. This council has demonstrated deep concern about lead. Councilman Green recently introduced an ordinance that will give schools $10 million to combat lead and asbestos in our children's classroom. This council also unanimously supported my bill to require universal blood lead screening. We were a city that doesn't even require universal blood lead screening and lead certification after the renovation of city public buildings. So if we want to hold the private sector responsible, the government's got to do its share too. If there are going to be any major renovations in any city buildings, then now we must seek lead certification as well. I am exasperated that this issue is still affecting our children, and I'm disappointed and saddened that we were not able to find common ground. But at some point, we can no longer talk about it. We have to be about the solutions. All of us agree that every child in Philadelphia deserves to live in a healthy and safe environment. And for sure, there is no perfect time for a perfect bill. It doesn't happen often in this council. So either we have to reckon with where we are if we're going to move the needle, and that phrase is now old, if we're going to make a small difference. And sometimes making a small difference warrants that we have to take more strident legislative action. I know that a vote on this bill is not comfortable for some of us. But here's what I also know in the words of Martin Luther King. At the end of the day, we're measured not what you do in times of comfort and convenience. It's where we act and how we stand during moments of challenge and controversy. I'm asking for a vote yes on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President. I just wanted to thank Councilman Blondell Reynolds Brown. Suddenly this morning, I walked over to her and I asked, would she be willing to co-sponsor a bill whereby if landlords subject to this law were to remediate the lead, that we would try to pass a tax credit dollar for dollar for the money they spend. We want safer environments, but in reality, there is a lot of people who can't afford to make those changes. It does affect the affordable housing, And we have a lot of folks that don't have a lot of money that rent out the space that they have. We want them to continue, and I appreciate her co-sponsorship of that. We'll see where that goes, but I think it's important not to have unfunded mandates or to make requirements without a method for people to achieve them. And so I am supporting her bill on the fact that I believe she is sincere. As she just said, she's bent over backwards. She's worked very hard to make our city safer, but also to accommodate those practical realities. And so with a bill that will create a tax credit for the remediation, I will be supporting her bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. No further speeches. This bill has been heard on 2 separate days. The question is, shall the bill pass finally? Mr. Decker, call the roll.
Councilwoman Bass.
Aye.
Councilwoman Blackwell.
Aye.
Councilman Dom. Aye. Councilman Greenlee.
Aye.
Councilwoman Gim.
Aye.
Councilman Heenan.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson. Councilman Jones. Councilman O'Neill. Councilman O. Councilwoman Parker.
Aye.
Councilwoman Guerrero Sanchez.
Aye.
Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Aye.
Councilman Squilla. Councilman Taubenberger.
Aye.
Council President Clark.
Aye. The ayes are 16, the nays are 0. Majority of members present. Just want to make it official. Majority of members present voting in the affirmative, the bill passes.